A CEO of a company called his secretary, his married mistress, and told her that he wants to go on a trip with her this weekend so they can have some fun, and that she can tell her husband it's a work trip. So she agreed. She called her husband and told him that she has a work trip so she won't spend this weekend with him. He understood. Her husband called his mistress and told her that his wife is out this weekend, so she should come because they will be all alone in the house. She agreed. The husband's mistress, who works as a babysitter, called the CEO and told him that she can't babysit his kid this weekend because she has things to do. So he agreed. The CEO called his secretary, his married mistress, to tell her that he can't go because he needs to babysit his kid. The secretary called her husband and told him the news. The husband told his mistress to cancel. The mistress called the CEO and told him that she canceled her things and she can be with his kid for the weekend. The CEO called his secretary. Reaching the end of a job interview, the human resources officer asked a young engineer fresh out of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, "And what starting salary are you looking for?" The engineer replies, "In the region of $125,000 a year, depending on the benefits package." The interviewer inquires, "Well, what would you say to a package of 5 weeks vacation, 14 paid holidays, full medical and dental, a company matching retirement fund to 50% of salary, and a company car leased every 2 years, say a red Corvette?" The engineer sits up straight and says, "Wow, are you kidding?" The interviewer replies, "Yeah, but you started it." A man we'll call Egon Tusk had just become the CEO of a large tech company. The departing CEO left him with 3 envelopes numbered 1, 2, and 3. "Open these if you run up against a problem you don't think you can solve," the departing CEO said. Egon made a lot of changes, but 6 months later, revenues had still not picked up and were in fact lower than when he was brought in. Egon was catching a lot of heat. Almost at his wit's end, he suddenly remembered the envelopes. He opened the first one. It said, "Blame your predecessor." Egon went all out on PR and tactfully laid the blame at the feet of the previous CEO. Satisfied with his comments, the press and Wall Street responded positively. The stock price went up and the heat was soon off him. About a year later, the ad revenues had still not picked up, and the company was facing serious engineering problems. Having learned from his previous experience, the CEO quickly opened the second envelope. It read, "Blame the environment." Egon went on PR overdrive again, blaming the war in Europe, the global recession, etc., and the pressure was off him again. More quarters passed. The company was still not generating enough revenue. Under pressure again, Egon turned to the third envelope. It said, "Prepare 3 envelopes." A CEO of a company was in need of a secretary. He spread ads all over town. A few days later, there was a knock on his door. It was a dog. He had a newspaper in his mouth. He opened it to the classifieds page and pointed to the ad that the CEO had placed. The CEO was impressed, but he thought it was a joke, so he decided to test the dog. "Look, I need a secretary who understands the basics of computers." The dog went to one of the secretary's desks, climbed on the chair, and turned on the computer and the printer in total tranquility. The CEO was amazed, but decided to go further. "That's good, but I need a secretary who understands spreadsheets." The dog quickly opened Excel, scanned rows and columns of data, and then used pivot tables to create dashboards of charts. The astonished CEO desperately followed. "Well, that's really fantastic, but my secretary must be bilingual." The dog replied, "Meow." A blind pilot walks into a plane waving his walking stick. The passengers all look at each other in disbelief. The flight attendant gets on the PA desk and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, the captain is legally blind, but rest assured he is one of the best pilots in the world with over 6,000 successful flights." Next, the co-pilot makes his way to the plane, and he is also blind and uses his walking stick to make it to the cabin. The flight attendant gets on the PA desk and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, the co-pilot is also blind, but rest assured he is the second best pilot in the world with over 5,000 successful flights." At this point, the plane begins to take off from the runway. As it gains speed, the passengers grow tenser. The plane keeps accelerating more and more, and as it approaches the end of the runway, it still hasn't left the ground. The plane is approaching the end of the runway at high speed, and the passengers scream, "Oh my God, we're all going to die!" Suddenly, the plane takes off and begins its ascent. The pilot turns to the co-pilot and says, "The day they stop screaming, we're screwed." A man of faith hears on the radio there's going to be flooding. He shrugs at the radio and says, "God will take care of me." He wakes up the next day and the first floor of his house is flooded. As the water rises, he climbs up onto the roof. A guy floats by in a canoe and says, "Hop in, brother, the water's rising." He waves the guy off and says, "God will take care of me." The guy is now halfway up the roof and he's straddling the roof ridge. A woman in a boat speeds up and says, "Get in the boat, the waters are going to keep rising." The guy waves her off and says, "God will take care of me." The guy is now on the tip top of the chimney, the water swirling around his neck. A helicopter hovers overhead, and the guy rappels down and says, "Grab on." Again, the guy says, "No thanks, God will save me." The guy wakes up at the pearly gates in line as St. Peter is waiting for Windows to install updates. He sees God through the gates on his throne with Jesus sitting on his lap. He yells up at God, "Why didn't you save me?" God yells down, "God damn it, I sent you a canoe, a boat, and then a helicopter." Two students of architecture, one Italian and one Greek, are at a bar to celebrate their graduation. The Italian student proposes an idea to his Greek classmate. "Let's meet up again in 10 years to see how successful we have become." The Greek student, interested in this proposition, accepts. 10 years later, the Greek man is invited to the home of the Italian man. When he arrives, he is picked up by a limousine, which drives through the countryside to a mansion on a hill. There's a pool outside, 3 floors, and a massive garden. The Greek man is awestruck and says, "My friend, how did you manage to accomplish this in 10 years? The Italian man laughs and says, "You see that road over there?" The Greek man looks over. "The government paid me to make a road that was 10 meters wide. I made it 9. Thinking over this, the Greek man nods and asks the Italian man to visit him in 10 years. 10 years later, the Italian man is invited to the home of the Greek man. When he arrives, he is picked up by a helicopter. The helicopter flies him to a massive mansion on the top of a mountain with 3 pools and a great vineyard stretching on for as far as the eye can see. There are cars lining the parking lot and stories upon stories of housing. The Italian man, awestruck, says to his friend, "My friend, how did you manage to accomplish this in 10 years? The Greek man laughs and says, "You see that road over there?" The Italian man replies, "What road?" A woman goes on a business trip overseas, leaving her husband behind to look after the house and kids. After a few days, she calls up to see how everything is. "Everything's fine," he says. "The kids are finally sleeping okay without you here, and my boss has given me an extra week off until you're back. Oh, I forgot to say, the cat's dead. She was hit by a car." "What?" says the wife. "Are you serious? Why couldn't you have broken it to me more gently?" "How do you mean?" "You know how much I loved her. You could have lied to me and just built it up gradually. Like, you could have said she was stuck on the roof and then tomorrow told me that the fire brigade was coming over to rescue her. And the day after that, she'd fallen and broken her leg. And then on Friday, you could tell me that she passed peacefully in her sleep. Don't just blurt out, 'The cat's dead.'" The man apologizes and his wife hangs up, angry at him. After a few days, she calls back to apologize. "I'm sorry I snapped. These meetings have just been really stressful. How are you all doing?" "We're all good here," says the man. "Johnny got a certificate for swimming 100 meters, and Molly says she wants a pony for Christmas. Oh, I nearly forgot. Your mom is stuck on the roof." Once there were 4 businessmen. They were sitting on a bench in a hospital waiting room because their wives were having babies. A nurse comes over and says to the first businessman, "Congratulations, your wife had a baby." The man says, "What a coincidence, I'm the president of And One." The nurse goes away. Then the nurse comes back and says to the second businessman, "Congratulations, your wife had twins." The man says, "What a coincidence, I'm the owner of the Minnesota Twins." The nurse goes away. The nurse comes back and says to the third businessman, "Congratulations, your wife had triplets." The man says, "What a coincidence, I work for Triple Crown." The nurse goes away. The nurse comes back and sees the fourth businessman alone on the bench crying. She asks, "Why are you crying?" The man replies, "I work for 7-Up." An aristocrat, his chef, and chief engineer were set to be executed during the French Revolution. The aristocrat is brought to the guillotine and says, "I am not afraid of my mortality. I refuse a blindfold and I wish to be face up so I can look death straight in the eyes." The executioner accepted this request, placed the man in the guillotine, and pulled the lever, but nothing happened. The blade did not drop. It was declared an act of God and proof of his innocence, and he was released. The chef is brought to the guillotine and requests to be beheaded face up as well. And again, when the executioner pulled the lever, the blade remained motionless. The chef was released and joined his master. Finally, the engineer is brought to the executioner. He too requests to lie supine. As the executioner is about to pull the lever, the engineer exclaims, "Oh, I see your problem." For several years, a man was having an affair with an Italian woman. One night, she confided in him that she was pregnant. Not wanting to ruin his reputation or his marriage, he paid her a large sum of money if she would go to Italy to secretly have the child. If she stayed in Italy to raise the child, he would also provide child support until the child turned 18. She agreed, but asked how he would know when the baby was born. To keep it discreet, he told her to simply mail him a postcard and write spaghetti on the back. He would then arrange for the child support to begin. One day, about 9 months later, he came home to his confused wife. "Honey," she said, "you received a very strange postcard today." "Oh, really?" he said. "Let me see." The wife gave it to him and watched as his husband read the card, turned white, and fainted. On the card was written, "Spaghetti, spaghetti, spaghetti. 2 with meatballs, 1 without. Send extra sauce." On their way to get married, a young Catholic couple was involved in a fatal car accident. The couple found themselves sitting outside the pearly gates, waiting for St. Peter to process them into heaven. While waiting, they began to wonder, could they possibly get married in heaven? When St. Peter arrived, they asked him if they could get married in heaven. St. Peter said, "I don't know. This is the first time anyone has asked. Let me go find out." And he left. The couple sat and waited for an answer for a couple of months. While they waited, they discussed the pros and cons if they were allowed to get married in heaven. Should they get married, with the eternal aspect of it all? What if it doesn't work? Are we stuck in heaven together forever? Another month passed. St. Peter finally returned, looking somewhat bedraggled. "Yes," he informed the couple, "you can get married in heaven." "Great," said the couple, "but we were just wondering, what if things don't work out? Could we also get a divorce in heaven?" St. Peter, red-faced with anger, slammed his clipboard on the ground. "What's wrong?" asked the frightened couple. "Oh, come on," St. Peter shouted. "It took me 3 months to find a priest up here. Do you have any idea how long it'll take to find a lawyer?" A couple was celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary when the wife claimed that her and her husband hadn't argued since their wedding night. After being asked about how they did it, the wife explains that after their wedding ceremony, they went and took a little honeymoon in a horse and buggy. The horse walked 10 miles and stopped, refusing to go further. "That's 1, said the wife. The horse looked back, walked another 5 miles, and stopped, refusing to go further. "All right, that's 3, said the wife angrily. She stepped out of their buggy, grabbed her shotgun, and shot the horse. "Hold on," said the husband. "What do you think you're doing? We're 20 miles from home with no way back, and that was a vicious act of animal cruelty." The wife looked at her new husband and said, "That's one." A man walks into a pet shop and says to the owner, "Okay, I want to buy a pet, but I don't want a boring or normal pet. No cats, dogs, or birds. I want something different." The pet shop owner informs him that he has a talking centipede. "Really?" the man replied. "How much?" The owner informs him that the talking centipede is $50. Happy with the unusual offering, he pays the money and takes his new pet home. On getting home, he lays the matchbox with the centipede in it on the table, opens it, and says, "Hello, Mr. Centipede. Fancy going to the pub for a few drinks?" The centipede says nothing. Figuring it must be tired from the journey, he decides to leave it for an hour and try again later. An hour later, he opens the matchbox and says, "Hello, Mr. Centipede. Fancy going to the pub for a few drinks?" The centipede says, "I heard you the first time. I'm putting my shears on them."
A married man tells his wife, "Honey, after all these years, I still love seeing your ass." She smiles and asks, "Is it because I've kept my girlish figure?" He responds, "No, because it means you are walking away." A priest, a thief, and an engineer were all waiting in line to be executed by guillotine during the French Revolution. The priest was to be the first to face his fate. As he stepped onto the platform, the executioner asked him, "Father, would you like to meet your maker face up or face down?" After thinking for a moment, the priest answered, "My son, if today is to be my last day, I wish to go face up so that I can look toward the heavens and the Almighty as I take my last breath." The executioner obliged, placing the priest on his back in the guillotine. He slowly raised the deadly blade, dripping with the blood of previous victims. At its maximum height, it snapped into place, and the crowd waited in anticipation. The priest said a quiet prayer, and the executioner released the blade. It careened down with terrifying speed, but unbelievably, it stopped just above the priest's neck, sparing his life. Believing it to be a sign from heaven, the executioner released the priest and sent him off to freedom. Next, it was the thief's turn. Asked the same question, the thief, seeing what had just happened to the priest, thought, "Why not? I have nothing to lose," and also chose to die face up. The executioner raised the blade to its maximum height, then released it. Amazingly, the blade stopped just above the thief's neck as well. The executioner, now certain that this must be some divine sign, freed the thief. Finally, it was the engineer's turn. When the executioner asked, "Face up or face down?" the engineer, though puzzled by the turn of events, replied, "Face up, please." The executioner laid the engineer down, securing him in the guillotine and raising the blade to its position of maximum potential energy. As the executioner prepared to release the blade, the engineer suddenly shouted, "Hang on a sec, I see your problem." A man walks into a diner during a terrible blizzard, but he only has enough money for a cup of coffee. He's starving, having not eaten all day. At the counter, he notices another man sitting with a steaming bowl of chili in front of him, but the man isn't eating it, he's just staring at it. The first man, stomach growling, calls over, "Are you going to eat that?" The second man shakes his head. "I've lost my appetite." "Would you mind if I took it?" the first man asks, eager to eat. "Not at all," the second man replies, sliding the bowl over to him. Without hesitation, the first man digs in, savoring the warmth of the chili. But as he nears the bottom of the bowl, he discovers a hairy, scabby Band-Aid stuck to the bottom. Grossed out, he immediately vomits everything he just ate right back into the bowl. The second man watches the scene unfold and calmly says, "Oh, that's about as far as I got into it too." A woman in a hot air balloon realized she was lost. She spotted a man in a boat below and lowered her altitude, then shouted to him, "Excuse me, can you help me? I promised a friend I would meet him an hour ago, but I don't know where I am." The man consulted his portable GPS and replied, "You're in a hot air balloon approximately 30 feet above a ground elevation of 2,346 feet above sea level. You're at 31 degrees, 14.97 minutes north latitude and 100 degrees, 49.09 minutes west longitude." She rolled her eyes and said, "You must be a Republican." "Yes, I am," replied the man. "How did you know?"
"Well," answered the balloonist, "everything you told me is technically correct, but I have no idea what to do with your information, and I'm still lost. Frankly, you've been not much help to me." The man smiled and responded, "You must be a Democrat." "I am," replied the balloonist. "How did you know?" "Well," said the man, "you don't know where you are and where you're going. You've risen to where you are due to a large quantity of hot air. You made a promise that you have no idea how to keep, and you expect me to solve your problem. You're in exactly the same position you were before we met, but somehow now it's my fault." Three couples went to see the minister to inquire about joining his church. The minister told them, "To become members, you must go without making love for 2 months, then come back and tell me how it went." 2 months later, the couples returned. The first couple, both retired, said it was no problem at all. The second couple, middle-aged, admitted that it was tough the first month, but after that, it wasn't too bad. The final couple, the newlyweds, looked a little sheepish. The minister asked, "What happened?" The husband hesitated before replying, "Well, everything was fine until my wife dropped a can of paint." "A can of paint?" the minister exclaimed in disbelief. "Yeah," the husband continued, "she bent over to pick it up and, well, I just couldn't help myself. Lust took over." The minister shook his head in disapproval. "You two are not welcome in my church." The husband grinned and said, "That's okay, Father. We're not welcome at Home Depot either."
One November afternoon, I picked my daughter up from kindergarten. She eagerly crawled into the back seat, and I asked, "What did you do today?" "We learned that boys are different from girls," she said excitedly. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, barely able to see the top of her head. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep things casual. She smiles brightly. "My teacher told us that boys have a thing and girls don't." I froze, unsure how to respond. "Well, yes, they do," I said cautiously. We sat in silence for a moment, and then she added, "That's how girls know boys are boys, because of that thing that hangs down." I mentally calculated the drive home. The usual 5-minute commute now felt like an eternity. She continued, "Did you know when boys see a girl, they puff up?" My palms began to sweat. Well, I stammered, still grasping for anything to steer the conversation in another direction. But she wasn't done. "Why do the girls like the boys to have those things?" she asked. I stopped. I mean, what woman hasn't asked herself that question at least once? Well, I hesitated, but she didn't need me to answer. She had her own explanation. "It's because it moves when they walk. The girls see it and they know he's a boy. Then the boy sees the girl and he puffs up and she knows he likes her too. And then they get married. And then they get cooked." That last part threw me off a bit, but overall, I had to admit she had a pretty good grasp of things. As soon as we pulled into the driveway, she hopped out of the car and pulled something from her school bag. "I drew a picture. Do you want to see?" I wasn't sure I did, but I took a look anyway. I had to sit down. There, all puffed up, looking irresistible to the ladies, was a crayon drawing of a big tom turkey. His snood, the thing that hangs down over his beak, was magnificent. His tail feathers were standing tall and proud. I couldn't help but laugh. She looked a bit offended at first, but when I told her I loved it, which I did, she got over it. That was the end of that conversation, for her anyway, but every year since, I can't help but think of it. And to be honest, I've never looked at a turkey or a man the same way again. The FBI had an open position for an assassin, and after conducting thorough background checks, interviews, and skill tests, they narrowed it down to 3 candidates. They brought the final candidates in to test their abilities. Each one passed the exams with flying colors. For the last test, the FBI agents led the first man to a large metal door and handed him a gun. "We need to know that you will follow orders no matter the circumstances," they explained. "Inside this room is your wife sitting in a chair. Your task is to kill her." The man stared at them in disbelief. "You can't be serious. I could never shoot my wife." The agent sighed and said, "Then you're not the right person for the job. Take your wife and go home." The second man was given the same instructions. He entered the room with the gun, and after about 5 minutes, he came out with tears in his eyes. "I tried, but I just couldn't do it." The agent shook his head. "You don't have what it takes. Take your wife home."
Finally, the last candidate, a woman, was given the same instructions. She entered the room with the gun. Moments later, they heard multiple shots, followed by crashing and loud banging on the walls. After a few minutes, everything went quiet. The door creaked open, and there stood the woman, drenched in sweat and looking exhausted. "Some joker loaded the gun with blanks," she said, panting. "I had to do it the hard way." A down-and-out guy looking for work applied at a zoo. The zoo didn't have any openings, but the keeper offered the guy an unusual position. It seems that the zoo's star gorilla had died suddenly, and since it was the main attraction, the zoo didn't want to release the information until a new gorilla had been procured. So the zoo offered the guy a temporary job as a gorilla, in a costume, of course, just until they could get a replacement animal. The man spent a full day getting used to his costume and learning how to act and how to move like a gorilla. The most important thing, his trainer said, is that you must never ever break character. Nobody can ever know that you're not the real gorilla. In the enclosure, the guy was fantastic. He mimicked the gorilla so well that nobody suspected a thing. One day, he swung a little too high and went over the wall, landing in the lion's enclosure. With the large, ferocious beast stalking him and licking its chops, our gorilla guy frantically searched for an escape. He ran, and of course, the lion immediately gave chase. Around and around they went, with the lion gaining ground, and finally the desperate gorilla, fearing for his life, decided to break character. So he shouted, "Help! Help!" Immediately behind him, he heard the lion growl, "Shut up! Do you want to get us both fired?" A little 10-year-old girl was walking home alone from school one day when a big man on a black motorcycle pulled up beside her. After following her for a while, he turned to her and said, "Hey there, little girl. Do you want to go for a ride?" "No," says the little girl as she keeps walking. The motorcyclist pulls up beside her again and says, "Hey, little girl, I'll give you $10 if you hop on the back." "No," she replies and hurries down the street. One last time the man tries. "Okay, kid, final offer. I'll give you $20 and a big bag of candy if you'll just hop on the back and we'll go for a ride." The little girl finally stops, turns, and screams, "Look, Dad, you're the one who bought the Honda instead of the Harley. You ride it." An Englishman and an Irishman walk into a bakery, their eyes scanning the shelves laden with freshly baked goods. Spotting a tray of warm buns on the counter, the Englishman hatches a plan. In one swift motion, he snatches 3 buns, slips them into his pockets, and strolls out, his face beaming with pride. Outside, he nudges the Irishman and says, "Now that is skill. Did you see how I took those buns without anyone noticing? That's what I call the art of stealth." The Irishman chuckled and shakes his head. "Stealth? That's just petty theft. Let me show you how to get those buns with style and wit." Intrigued, the Englishman follows the Irishman back into the bakery. With confidence, the Irishman approaches the owner and says, "Good day, sir. Would you like to see a magic trick guaranteed to blow your mind?" The owner, intrigued and curious, nods. "All right, a magic trick. All right, show me what you got." The Irishman flashes a charming smile. "For this trick, I'll need 3 of your finest buns." The owner hands over a bun, and the Irishman promptly eats it. He then requests a second bun, devours it, and does the same with the third. Standing there, he wipes his mouth and smiles contentedly. The bakery owner, now thoroughly unimpressed, scowls. "Magic trick? All I see is you eating my buns. Where's the magic?" The Irishman grins, points to the Englishman, and says, "Check his pockets."
A circus ringleader and his wife were living with their main act, an alcoholic chimpanzee. The chimpanzee would always do the same thing every day: find the liquor cabinet, drink a few bottles, screech and destroy things for a few hours, and then pass out in a random spot for the rest of the day. The wife could not stand the chimp, but the ringmaster did not have enough money to find a home for the chimpanzee or the courage to take him along to his AA meetings, so they do their best to limit the chimpanzee's drinking. One day, the wife tells the ringmaster, "You need to get rid of that chimp. It's making me go crazy." The ringmaster, of course, does not want this, so the wife goes, "Well then, tell me what you will do. I'll be in my room." As the wife is heading to her room, the ringmaster sees the chimpanzee grab a bottle of vodka from the liquor cabinet. He walks towards the chimpanzee while pointing at it and says, "Hey, put it down." The wife walks in the room with a shotgun and says, "Good idea." A man strolled into a busy restaurant and found himself a seat. The moment he sat down, he couldn't help but notice the place was full of gorgeous waitresses. One in particular caught his eye. She was curvy and confident and wore a skirt short enough to make his heart race. With legs that seemed to stretch for miles, she glided over to his table and in a sultry voice asked, "Are you ready to order, sir?" The man quickly glanced at the menu, then slowly looked her up and down, before saying with a sly grin, "A quickie?" The waitress froze, her cheeks flushed crimson, and without a word, she spun on her heel and stormed off. A few minutes later, still fuming but professional enough to try again, she returned. "Sir," she said firmly, "have you decided what you would like?" The man leaned back in his chair, gave her another long, deliberate look, and repeated with confidence, "Yes, a quickie, please." Her hand flew before he even saw it coming. Smack! A slap that echoed through the restaurant. She stormed away for good this time. The man sat there rubbing his cheek, baffled. Then the gentleman at the next table leaned in and whispered helpfully, "Buddy, I think it's pronounced quiche."